the honourable member for Fowler be disagreed to. The member for Higgins.
Thank you, Speaker. Security is a prerequisite to prosperity. Foundational to security is having a roof over your head. This is acutely known by our Prime Minister, who grew up in precarious circumstances himself, in social housing, and by our Housing Minister, Julie Collins, who speaks quietly of the trauma associated with her period of homelessness. Their lived experience, plus the growing backlog of Australians seeking home ownership or, at the minimum, shelter after a wasted decade, is what is driving our determination to act. The problem is of such magnitude that many of my young constituents in Higgins have given up on the prospect of home ownership. Rather than home ownership being a right, it has become an aspiration, and it is receding like a mirage in the desert. My constituents are resigned to joining the 42% of people in Higgins who rent. In Higgins, rented units make up 29% of dwellings, well above the 9% nationally, and rent is not trivial, ranging from $386 in Murrumbeena, $395 in Carnegie, $411 in Windsor, $415 in South Yarra, $421 per week in Armidale and Prahran, and a whopping $590 in Kooyong, well above the greater Melbourne median of $390. According to the 2021 census, 27% of renters in Higgins are experiencing renter stress, paying 30% of their income towards rent or more. And rents have gone up since then, pushing more of my constituents into renter stress. In the past 18 months to February this year, rent has increased across the board, and these suburbs range from 7.1% in Armidale to 12.5% in South Yarra. Getting a foot into the housing market has become a pipe dream for young people, not only in Higgins but across Australia. In the highest renting suburbs in Higgins, this is what median house prices are doing. As of February last year, 2022, median house prices were as follows. Armidale and South Yarra, $2 million, median. Prahran, $1.8 million. Carnegie and Murrumbeena, $1.7 million. And Windsor, $1.6 million. And they have been going north for the past 5 years in these suburbs. The same suburbs, incidentally, with the highest number of renters. And why wouldn't people want to buy here with their village feel, proximity to public transport and amenity, vibrant shopping strips and restaurants? My constituents keep flocking to these areas. With every year, house prices stretch further away. Amanda's daughter is a nurse, a few years out, who is trying to get into the housing market. She is a doer and a saver, having put away $100,000 in savings since she worked as a teenager at McDonald's. Remarkable. She works near a big city hospital and justifiably wants to live near where she works. Those late shifts plus the emergency ask when no one else is available demand that she drop everything and come to work to serve her community. Despite doing everything right, Amanda's daughter is struggling. Amanda's daughter's story is tailor-made to some of the solutions we are offering, or is it the other way around? That our proposals are tailor-made to her predicament. And it starts with the Housing Australia Future Fund, a $10 billion investment to build 30,000 social and affordable homes over 5 years, which interlocks with the National Housing Accord. The latter, led by our Treasurer, commits us in partnership with the states and territories, industry, super funds and construction to build 1 million homes over 5 years from 2024. Managed by the Future Fund guardians, some of whom live in my electorate, the Housing Australia Future Fund will plough returns from the $10 billion invested back into building social and affordable housing. 10,000 homes will be allocated to essential workers like Amanda's daughter, a nurse, but also to other workers like police, people we simply cannot live without. An additional 4,000 homes will be earmarked for vulnerable Australians, like women fleeing domestic violence and older Australians. The fastest-growing group of homeless Australians are women over the age of 55 years, who find themselves marooned, without a place to call home when their circumstances change, due to relationship breakdown, job loss or bereavement. Indeed, in Australia, 7,500 women around the country return to violent partners because they have nowhere else to go. Urgency is further heightened, of course, by the pandemic, which has exacerbated domestic violence. Women fleeing family violence are one particularly desperate group, but there are others covered by our fund, including veterans who have fallen through the cracks, who have been allocated $30 million, and First People in remote communities, living in a state of disrepair and squalor, who have been allocated $200 million over the next 5 years. The fund will target people living on the edge, either in the throes of homelessness or at risk. We want to pull them back from that edge so that they can stabilise their lives and move forwards. It's a preventative measure, like a handbrake, that stops the slide into hopelessness and dysfunction. Domestic violence, a shortfall of affordable housing, unemployment, mental illness, family breakdown, substance misuse contribute to homelessness. Often, as a doctor, I would say, there for the grace of God go I, because I often came across patients, people who had pretty standard, what we would call normal lives, living in suburbia, who had fallen on hard times. This had destabilised them and sent them down a downward spiral, and they ended up washing up on my ward. Living in a car or couch surfing means that homelessness can be hidden from plain sight. The shame of defeat weighs heavily on homeless people as they spin their wheels in search of enduring shelter. That's why we have established the Interim National Housing Supply and Affordability Council to provide independent advice to government on options. One of the Council's key tasks will be to advise us on the National Housing and Homelessness Plan, a plan to deal with homelessness. Given planning and zoning is not the remit of the Commonwealth, our government has fulsomely engaged with the states and territories, holding 3 meetings with our state counterparts to ensure that we are all pulling in the same direction. We have rejected the divisive federal-state antics that were the signature of the previous government, because the scale and the severity of the problem is too great. In Higgins, Prahran has been a hotspot for homelessness for the duration of the time that I worked at the Alfred, and these are where I picked most of my patients up, and they're still there. A national homelessness plan is long overdue after a wasted decade where people like my patients, fell further behind. Given the urgency of the situation, with families living in tents in part of Australia, we cannot wait for the fund to start paying out, which is why we have unlocked $575 million from the National Housing Infrastructure Facility to get going. For my constituents with itchy feet, the regional first home buyer guarantee may appeal. Launched 3 months ahead of time by our government, it has already helped 1,600 Australians into homes in the regions. They are living the dream, but it's also easing pressure on the rental market. We accept that this suite of proposals is a start, and calls for more ambition are legitimate. More ambition means more construction workers, more materials, more boots on the ground industry expertise, all of which is in dire short supply. In Victoria, major construction projects like the civil plus hospitals have added further constraints on workforce. This is where our free TAFE courses targeting urgent skills like construction kicks in. I need my constituents and others around Australia who may be searching for options to check out the offerings at their local TAFE. In my electorate, it's Holmesglen, and it's a fantastic place, a happy place of learning linked to career pathways that I have visited many times. The magnitude of the housing crisis is a clarion call to action, which successive Liberal national governments failed to heed. We in the Albanese government are geared for action on this front, because a home, as I said in my maiden speech, is like the warmth of a million suns. Let's bring our people out of the shadows and into the light. I commend this bill to the House.
The question now is that the amendments moved by the honourable member for Griffith to the amendment moved by the honourable member for Fowler be disagreed to. The member for Petrie.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Well, look, I'm happy to rise and speak on housing, because housing isn't just an issue in one particular place, but particularly right around